Welcome, everybody. It's great to see so many of you here. Leopold would be very pleased. Yes, it's a very great honor to be able to read Leopold's lecture for him. Leopold is deeply committed to NCICA and also to his research practice on, basically, he's an international expert on the ceramic of Pablo Picasso. And it's very important for him to share his ideas with other people, and NCICA is the perfect venue for such a thing. So when I learned he couldn't come, I offered to read his text for him, which is what I will do straightforwardly. The Ceramicness of Pablo Picasso Ceramic Sculptures. This lecture is an English synopsis of a catalogue essay. The original manuscript was published in French in the catalogue Picasso Sculpture Céramique, a thematic exhibition held in Rouen Musée de la Céramique in France in the spring of 2017. Since my premises for my contribution were a formal analysis addressing unabashedly the overt but usually unacknowledged ceramicness of his sculptural production in the field of ceramics, I thought that it would be an appropriate topic for a specialized audience such as the group of people attending the NCICA conference. The title could be translated as The Ceramicness of Pablo Picasso's Ceramic Sculptures. It is also the designation of today's presentation. This lecture is divided into 11 conceptual sections, namely ceramic sculpture, volume, the premises, the corpus, conceptual analysis of the sculptures, atypical sculptural processes, the sculptural plates, found ceramic objects, the thrown ceramic heads, even more radical, and lastly, aesthetic dilemmas. In his book, Picasso Ceramic, published in 1957, Daniel Henry Cowiller, his dealer and friend, writes, in conclusion, with a prophetic insight. To briefly describe this undertaking and to distinguish it from most other similar works, I would say that Picasso is not a painter to whom a ceramist has asked for his collaboration, but an artist whom ceramics has tempted. But one place where it was possible, in a pottery. Ceramics has taken an important place in his preoccupation. I am sure he will not cease to amaze us. End of quote. The ceramicness of Picasso's ceramic sculptures is characterized, among other things, by their affirmed and exploited materiality, the use of the real negative intrinsic volume, and the resulting eccentric forms as neo-sculptures. Ceramic sculpture. Authentic ceramic sculpture is in itself a real artistic heterotopia, a particular universe that is resolutely parallel if one uses the definition of French philosopher Michel Foucault from the point of view of form, image, as well as conceptualization. Its proper assessment is based on unconventional but specific and quantifiable templates, which should in no way take away the right to be readily accepted in the official fine art sculpture category. Also, techniques for making ceramics are sui generis and do not usually correspond to those commonly used by traditional sculptors. The same situation prevails for the formal conceptual problematic ruling the fine arts genus. The point of departure, the genesis of the physical work, the ultimate ceramic sculpture is usually different depending on the outcome. In ceramics, it is above all a matter of interior nothingness, of the structural negative volume, that is to say, of the void contained and retained by a wall, which delimits the physical form itself, a non-existent notion in painting and sculpture. In the later case, reference is normally made to positive space or negative space, but without actual volume. The one existing in ceramics is a space, of course negative, but physical and resolutely three-dimensional. Volume. The ceramic object is usually constructed from the inside toward the outside instead of being sculpted from the exterior, as is commonly the case in a sculpture. Moreover, volume, affirmed or nullified by direct intervention on the surface of the object, constitute the preeminent conductive concept in the case of Picasso's ceramic sculptures. Working from a void is a unique formal problematic and a dominant ceramic idiosyncrasy that Picasso eminently understood and creatively exploited in a surprising, masterful way throughout his career as a ceramicist. Picasso had already approached the notion of the volumetric, the physical void, during his so-called Cubist period. Moreover, in one of his first ceramic sculptures made in Valoris in 1946, a small wheel throne and hand-modeled head of a faun, he already uses the void as a structural element. Cubism is often a deconstruction of solid forms, however, rarely of solid masses, but heads, buildings, guitars, and fruits translated possibly into images pictorially dissected and recomposed in two-dimensional format, such as in the Brick Factory at Tortosa of 1909, now in the Hermitage Museum. Contrary to the concrete negative volume of ceramic objects, the one in Cubism is not real. It is fictitious, alluded. The volumetric dimension in Pablo Picasso's ceramic work is not only manifest, but sometimes it is pictorial, as in the Gothic picture decorated with two birds in a cage of 1948, or in the 1961 blue parrot lamp. This theme of the cage with a real or suggested vacuum is found in several prototypes of historical ceramics. When one sculpts, one removes or adds matter here and there by reconstructing an image to create planes, empty sections, reliefs, distortions, but one does not create essentially real physical independent negative volumes. The empty space within a bronze sculpture is simply an incidental empty space, a cavity. The starting point for a standard sculpture is normally a material form, an image to be, not the void itself. It is not at all the transformation of emptiness, but an ultimate tangible spatial simulacrum. The premises. Further refinement is needed when talking about ceramic sculpture. Of this group are generally excluded terracotta because they are traditionally considered as an independent art subgroup. Think of Greek terracottas or terracottas of various eras and provenance, a category of sculptures with a particular and abundant documentation. For classification purposes, it could be established that terracotta are not covered with glaze, as in this bust of impressed Eugénie by the 19th century French sculptor Jean-Baptiste Carpeaux in the Masséna Museum. Therefore, the color of these objects is that of the bare fired clay. An exception is necessary if the offbeat form that emanates is a pottery form, such as the notorious modernized Tanagra statues and the suspended shards of pinat representing epigrammatic faces, and the amazing specimen of the ceramic menagerie like the bull in the Picasso Museum in Antibes, which are all terracotta works with no glaze. The corpus. This tenacious cohesion between the work and the specificity of ceramics that Picasso consciously wanted to accentuate and exploit was noticeable as soon as he returned to Valoris in the summer of 1947, arriving at the Madoura pottery with a portfolio filled with sketches, according to Georges Ramien, the owner of the factory. From then on, he writes, Picasso installs himself in our studio, quote. The type of pottery form and sculptures are numerous, evidently passing from the usual in the round to the bas-relief and found objects such as the tattered tomate transformed into owls or even caricatural portraits. The uniqueness and interest of these ceramics ready-made is that their ultimate transformation respects the category. That is, they have not lost their formal specificity, their intrinsic ceramicness. Conceptual analysis of the sculptures. Picasso transforms the original found object, in this case the horizontal pavement, into an ineluctable three-dimensional image, a possible sculpture. By superimposing the two horizontal artifacts, Picasso confronts not only verticality and horizontality, but reinvents a new status, a different spatio-temporal existence for the small tiles in question. The object becomes subject and therefore transcends by the very fact its initial classification. The works included in the new compilation now being discussed, called Structural Pots, are intelligently planned. They are eccentric assemblage of non-figurative modules executed from geometric shape, previously made on a potter's wheel, according to the many preparatory drawings by Picasso for Reclining Kid. The formal sources of these originate possibly from some of the catalogs documenting ancient pottery such as the Corpus Vasorum Antiquorum and the Encyclopédie Photographique de l'Art that both the photographer Dora Maar and the ceramist Suzanne Ramier, devoted auxiliaries to the artist, own. The composite modular structures present in Picasso's sculptural vessels are characterized by their manifest volumetric stature, their simulated structural precariousness, and the noticeable Greek influence in the motif painted on the surface of several of them, as shown in Les Chassiers of 1947-1948, also known by the title L'Oiseau, in the collection of the Picasso Museum in Antibes. In this case, it is not a matter of decorative treatment in the restricted sense of the term, but of an appropriation of a specific and well-known artistic style to mimic a mnemonic strategy in order to characterize, to mimic its origin, and therefore to affirm once more without ambivalence the ceramicness of the work. The exterior coating on Picasso's ceramics is not a decoration, but rather a surface comparable to pigments on a canvas. Atypical sculptural processes. Again, Picasso uses atypical building methods for a traditional sculptor, but which are quite common in ceramics: the assemblage, superposition, and juxtaposition of resolutely volumetric, geometric, wheel-thrown shapes for the erection of structural images unique in its genre. Still more typical in ceramic, but rather quirky as sculptures, are the many wheel-thrown pots transformed into anthropomorphic and zoomorphic image only by the fine pressure of the fingers. Thanks to the air trapped inside the form in the wet stage, helping thus the maker and becoming a fundamental accomplice of the artist during the shaping of the form, a mode of spatial reinvention used for millennia by traditional potters. In a second series of three-dimensional constructions, intuitive images were fashioned using a common basic shape, a classic bottle with a long neck. The deformation, here more aggressive, of the letter art wheel-thrown volume by the use of the natural plasticity of clay and the push and pull strategy, the action-reaction resulting from the external pressure, gave rise to a flock of dynamic sculptures in the form of birds, such as doves, in various poses. The sculptural plates. Picasso enhanced and characterized a multitude of dishes and molded plates. The majority remain in the family of the low relief, although conceptually many transgress the genre. Some examples may be fairly described as high relief because of the dimensions of the elements clearly detached from the horizontal surface, and thus can legitimately be considered as sculptures. On the other hand, if these were hung on the wall, their acceptability as such would be less problematic. These include Le Boudin et les œufs and Plat Poisson, where these are clearly prominent, two masterpieces of the Museum of Modern Art of Céret. The figurative pieces modeled as protuberance and glued to the bottom of these dishes are the sculptural and metaphoric contents, meaning image that can be touched. This initial horizontality of the image allows the establishment of antipodal dynamic pictorial planes, as was the case of the floor tiles discussed earlier, an artistic abutment between the flat surface and the three-dimensional vertical structure. The most convincing of these works are the still lifes stylistically derived from Bernard Palissy, 1510-1590, the French potter of the Renaissance, and the group of ceramists known as Aviso of Tours from 1840-1910, and from Caldas de Reina, 1853-1920 in Portugal. Found ceramic objects. The ceramic objects found and then metamorphosed into sculptures represent a major segment of Picassoan production. The originality of this transformation resides in the modification of the initial ceramic structure into an independent and new, decidedly ceramic sculpture. These transformations include the floor tiles previously discussed, and in 1950, the series of Neo-Greek pignates. The latter were transfigured by simply painting black slip on the outer surface of the container with motif inspired by ancient Athenian pottery with a red or black figure background. Always respectful of the parameters specific to the discipline, Picasso even called this group my Greek pots. Let us not forget the recycled skillets of 1950, transmuted into individual handheld masks with handles, remodeled by the addition of black and white painted patterns, here also imitating the surfaces of antique Greek pottery. These lines create faces with caricatural expressions. Another part of this set of sculptures reconstructed with ready-made part that we must seriously consider is composed of the volumetric fragments erected in 1962. Here, eccentric shards of anodized construction bricks found, reclaimed, then reinvented into an astonishing range of polychrome heads called faces by Georges Ramien. The accidental form of these ceramic fragments becomes the bizarre support for a gestural representation of non-realistic, although credible, polychrome faces. It is the perimeter of the brick shards that determines and suggests the appearance of the pseudo-portraits. Picasso's gestural marks on each side of the shards are enigmatic and non-figurative images, spots of color that only become therefore decipherable and therefore understandable by the viewer when its viewing angle is appropriate. The accurate reading of the work is done when the frontal side and the viewer are face-to-face, as substantiated with this 1962 ed with Vase. The basic structural principle of in the round is now abolished, replaced by the notion of planes, flat surfaces, which somewhat recall the strategy of Cubist pictorial fragmentation. The coloring is clarifying and establishing a new formal status of the found ceramic objects, such as the recovered brick shards, confirms and affirms its transubstantiation, its ultimate aesthetic destiny as image. Since we have now just touched on the wacky recycled brick fragments used as substitute support, it would be quite appropriate to focus our attention on broken pieces of pignat transfigured into sections of epigrammatic faces with two eyes, a raised nose, the handle, and a mouth, as shown in Fragment de Pottery Visage of 1950. These were meant to be hung on the wall by a metal wire, as wood hunting trophies adorning the hut of a headhunter. The interest of these works resides in the audacity of their ceramic structures and in the astonishing freedom of rendering. There are also the reappropriated kiln furniture, decrepit bagged wall, commonly known as gazettes, metamorphized into convex pilasters for charcoal-like drawings, such as in the Gazette de Four décorée d'une femme nue se coiffant in 1950 in the Musée National Picasso, Paris. Picasso freely painted black slip on the raw surface, previously fired and fired again props, human figures or linear face, with the obvious intention of exploiting the convexity of the support to add a hint of truthfulness to the image and depth. The thrown ceramic heads. Undoubtedly, the head that is the most iconically ceramic is Tête de Femme, executed in Valoris in 1954, now in the Musée National Picasso, Paris. The bold black lines skillfully drawn on the surface of the large inverted vase made on the potter's wheels attest the transformation of the original ceramic form as a stylized head. However, the magisterial Bourrage provençal avec femmes, enfants et fleurs of 1952 is conceptually very different from that type of head. In this exceptional work, the negative space, the void between the pottery and the handle, the braided hair, unequivocally suggests the virtual cranium of the woman. The other traditional women heads, dated 1961 and dedicated to his instructor, Suzanne Ramier, are part of a set of less marginalized heads from a sculptural point of view. They must be mentioned here because they represent a more standard group and the least Picassoan sculptures of his ceramic work. Throne pictures constitute the morphological foundation for these unique heads, whose handle become the braided headdress. Two noticeable kinds of ulterior alterations were applied to this usual method of pottery making. The first is characterized by the classical sculptural technique of addition of soft clay in order to fashion facial traits directly on the throne forms. The second, as seen, is Tête de Femme au Nœud of 1948, an earlier spectacular specimen, is distinguished by the use of brushed-on colors to define the volumetric head, previously prepared by the flattening and with the addition of throne pots, superimposed and manipulated. Even more radical. Among the most striking and original ceramic sculptures in his production at the Madoura studio are the magnificent flower vase with bouquets, most of them polychrome, notably this spectacular Vase à fleurs of 1948 in the collection of the Musée National Picasso, Paris. Its architectonic structure is composed of two distinct volumetric prefabricated sections. The base is shaped by the wheel throwing technique, representing a traditional vase form with easily identifiable morphology, in which is inserted an imposing extravagant inverted cone, suggesting a bouquet of flowers on which Picasso painted the patterns characterizing the outlines of floral arrangements. On the base, he drew disparate dark silhouettes around the vase itself, which form, in negative, a string of stereotypical though different vases. Not only did these dissect the sculptures in disjointed vertical planes, they also establish a sequential visual presentation of the object. Each of these motifs represents a dissimilar image of this vase with bouquet. This theme of the bouquet of flowers has been developed brilliantly for several years and also counts as ceramic supports of multiple so-called Gothic pictures that have been pictorially transformed into figurative vases and bouquets without, however, conceptually crossing the critical border between the work of art, a formal abstraction, and the utilitarian object. The flower vase with their bouquets nevertheless have several formal relatives in the history of European ceramics, such as the 1755 Vincennes soft-paste porcelain Vase le Boiteux à bouquet de fleurs. The most radical and revolutionary ceramic sculpture imagined by Pablo Picasso is the astonishing Picture with Open Vase of 1954 in a private collection. It is the first intangible but real image of a volumetric pottery never ever conceived in the discipline, and absolutely conceptually visionary amputated ceramic. The basic physical structure is a picture from Madoura's Courant stock, in which Picasso squarely carved and subtracted from its frontal belly a negative silhouette of a credible prototypical vase, an admittedly recognizable image. Aesthetic dilemmas. Numerous pictures are divided into vertical sections, the front and the back, on which are juxtaposed various patterns, often as somewhat duplicate of the profile of the container itself, usually a white silhouette, applied on the real physical shape. This kinetic pictorial deconstruction and reconstruction scheme allows the handle of the palpable pottery form to be versatile and therefore serve for each of these three suggested pictorial models. Incidentally, La Source Pichet of 1954 on the screen is adorned with lateral silhouettes of similar stereotypical flat white pictures, one on each side of the vessel. However, these also appear on Picture with Open Vase, pierced with a vacant profile of a conventional flower vase, and made a few weeks later, are green and decorated with a central medallion in relief. This optical situation results de novo in an iterative multiplication of images of picture, where each can easily be interpreted as an independent container. Under these circumstances, we could easily argue that there are now three pictures. But physically, there is in fact only one artifact. A second possibility interpretation of possible proposes that the black outline be the shadow of a picture itself. Picasso said, "I often see a light and a shadow. Consequently, this supposition mentally cancels out its natural volumetric shape and also its status as a thing. This new circumstantial reality now asserts the two-dimensional character of the immediate image, and in this conjecture, where am I? This is a bit confusing to me. I'm expecting it's a bit confusing to you too. This new circumstantial reality now asserts the two-dimensional character of the immediate image, and in this conjecture suggests the dematerialization of the ceramic object." I'm going backward. That's what's happening. I'm pressing the wrong button. I'm so sorry. Now we're back where I'm supposed to be. I'm going to start this over. This new circumstantial reality now asserts the two-dimensional character of the immediate image, and in this conjuncture suggests the dematerialization of the ceramic object, a process emanating from the strategy used previously in the thematic series of guitars in Cubist collages of the year 1912-1918, where the white section framed by a black outline suggests a negative image, a void corresponding to a virtual bottle that had actually disappeared. Therefore, depending on the category of the plastic support, the real pottery shape or the volume itself, the true meaning of space designated by either the white or black section is antithetical. It may be positive or negative, a full or a vacuum, as the case may be. The intention to fundamentally alter the visual perception of a form by using tangible volumetric space is manifested and repeated in Picasso's ceramic production, as we can see in Coupelle Saint of 1955, which is an adaptation of the soft-paste porcelain breast bowl Saint, executed at the Sèvres manufacture in 1787 for Queen Marie Antoinette's dairy at Rambouillet. Unlike the original, Picasso's version does not have a neoclassical tripod on which rests the cup. Moreover, the latter is concave instead of being convex, as is the original prototype. Another inspirational source for this form might be an antique black figure, Greek mastos, dating from 520 BC. The Vase Deux Ans from 1954 is a convincing example of the series of vases with handles and minimal conical collars pictorially superimposed one on top of the other, usually black on white or white on black, a pictorial technique playing with the volumetric and visual perception of the full and the void, and also with the true and the false. In one case, the positive becomes negative. In the second, the situation is reversed, surprisingly without modifying the material curve, the convexity of the initial vessel. Another supplementary interesting feature is the visual multiplicity of vases that can be discovered after a meticulous scrutiny of this two-handled vase into medieval pictures. Beside the original physical black structure, we can count the front and back white manor duplicate and one right and one left jugs. As argued with the earlier description of the role of the void in the interpretation of the bourrage provençal, a conceptual rule often used by Picasso, these modifications in surface treatment do not, however, affect the silhouette and the inherent volume of the palpable object, the real thing, as in the work Picture with Open Vase described earlier. This work is perhaps the apotheosis of Picasso's eminently formal critical conceptual research, unique and specifically ceramic. In traditional sculpture, form and surface are mostly in symbiosis and are usually only a monolithic reality. However, frequently in ceramics, they are two autonomous corporeities that influence the exact meaning of the ultimate image. This is a critical formal notion that Picasso, the artist, ceramicist, sculptor, understood and repeatedly used in his work, attesting of a prodigiously profound insight. The pot on a pot is a recurring theme of his ceramic work, and moreover, a classic decorative and a frequent formula encountered in this autonomous field of intervention, as we can see, for example, in this Chinese export porcelain garniture of the 18th century. As a case in point, consider the vase on vase that we have just analyzed. A quaint paragon to add to this conceptual scheme is the work entitled Vase Pichet, dated 1950-1951. An already fired clay flower pot is brought into the forefront, reappropriated and transmuted into a new specific shape, a pitcher, by the addition of brutally sculpted white plaster outgrowths suggesting a handle. This type of modification, consisting of adding parts made of a different material from the original one, reminds us of the refined 17th and 18th century fashion of mounting precious and rare Oriental ceramics popular in Europe. The original configuration lost its basic specificity as a vase because of the bronze additions to the ceramic form and subsequently became a completely different shape. With Picture with Open Vase, Picasso clarified, synthesized, and materialized his creative intentions by taking great care to glaze in white the concave inner wall of the mutilated receptacle, and then to emphasize in black the outline of the suggested frame, delimiting henceforth explicitly the disemboweled section. This intervention still recalls some of the works of the famous group of Cubist collage on the theme of guitars at the beginning of his career. For example, let's mention the glass guitar and bottle of 1913 in the collection of the Museum of Modern Art in New York. Here you can see on the lower right the suggested shape of an emblematic wine bottle with long neck, topped with a cork, surrounded by a black rectangle that acts as a frame for the white contour. This pictorial tactic used to establish a negative image, a suggested vacuum, an air or light entry, is repeated in several works of this group of collage. It is easy to admit that the conceptual scheme used for the silhouette pierced in the flap of the picture with open vase is aesthetically analogous. However, its final artistic result is fundamentally different because of the now perceptible physical spatial reality irrefutably attesting the undeniable sagacity and artistic genius of Pablo Picasso. Hopefully, this demonstration, reflection, and discourse pertaining to the acknowledgement of the ceramicness of the sculptural ceramic production of Pablo Picasso is convincing enough, even if the word ceramicness is not yet in the dictionary. The one thing I've always liked about Leopold's writing is that he will never use a simple word when a very complicated one can be.